Hey, welcome back to 913 Outdoors. I've been riding KTM since 2005, and I want to go over some things that I've learned over the years that'll hopefully help you out. First thing I want to talk about is the air forks. A lot of guys automatically hate air forks. They've had some of the Japanese setups in the past that were pretty bad and almost impossible to set up. Even with KTM, I hear a lot of complaints. People think they're basically harsh and stiff and hard to get dialed into. But the key to these is you really have to think about the air pressure as a spring. So when you're riding a spring fork bike, you're not constantly changing to a different size spring, right? Best thing is to go to Racetech's website, and you can use their spring calculator. It'll give you a calculation for what rear spring you need based on your weight and riding style, and it'll tell you how much air pressure you should run. That is a very good baseline, and I would use that and stick within 5 psi up or down. And once you get that dialed in, it is what it is. Leave it there and play with your compression and rebound. You can see on mine, I added this little pipe extension. These are available on Amazon. It's really, really hard to access the air fitting on these. You got to take off the bar pad. This controls are always in the way. These fittings are like $1, $2, something like that on Amazon for like a 10-pack of them. So I highly recommend buying one of these. Works the same way, you're just taking the cap off here. You have a lot easier access. Only drawback to this is you need to take these off when you take the forks out to service them, which honestly is no big deal at all. For a 215-pound sea rider, I am running 164 psi. That's kind of my sweet spot on mine. Basically check this every maybe 2 to 3 rides, or if there's a big temperature change. Usually it doesn't budge. Sometimes I have to add a little bit, but it's really easy. Takes just like 5 minutes. Also, a lot of the Japanese bikes like the Showa and KYB stuff, you got to bleed them every moto or every ride, and you get a little bit of air out of them. KYB not as bad, but definitely the Showa. KTMs, I find every 4 or 5 rides I'll bleed them and barely ever get any air out of them, so don't really worry about it as much. Little Torx head makes it a little bit easier than the flat heads you get on the Japanese bike. This is a 23 model. They've got the compression adjusters right on the top of the fork, rebound right at the bottom. So this is your damping leg, and the other side is just your air. So all your adjustments are just on this side. Makes it really easy to get that fork dialed in. So most of the time when you see people complaining about the air fork being too harsh, what they do is most people will drop the air pressure to try to get a more plush feeling. And it's really the opposite of what you should be doing. When you lower the air pressure, you're letting the fork sit farther down in the stroke, and it's going to be harsher there. The farther the fork goes down, the more compression it's going to have. It's going to help you from bottoming out and bigger impacts. So the best thing to do if you go out on your air fork, and like I said, use the Racetech chart. It's really, really helpful. If you do find the fork feels a little bit harsh, I would try adding 5 to 10 psi, see where it feels, then take away 5 psi from where you started and see what the difference is. Most of the time, going more psi actually makes that fork feel softer. It's going to let it ride up higher in the stroke, and your compression is what you're feeling. You're not feeling the spring pressure. Next, real quick on the shock on these, KTM makes it really easy. They used to have just like a bolt head here to adjust your high and low speed compression. Now they've got dials for both high and low speed compression and rebound on the bottom here. If you need to change the spring on these, all you really need to do is pull this linkage off, drop this, and you can crank that preload all the way out, and you can drop the spring right out the bottom. You don't have to take the shock completely out of the bike. This applies for bikes going all the way back to at least 2016. It's really easy to do. It takes probably 10 minutes to swap springs on these bikes. Previous gen 2016 through 2022 bikes. These are the oil pump gears that come in them. They're made of plastic. And if your bike gets too hot, overheats, these gears can warp. And when they do warp, they have no oil pressure at all, and your engine will be destroyed. There's a person on Facebook, if you look him up, his name's TW Hicks. He makes a really, really nice aluminum gear set for these. Same part that the factory teams have been running. For 2023 and 24 models, they come stock in your bike. If you got one of those, swap these out. It takes about an hour. It's not that hard. You have to pull the clutch off, pull the clutch cover, and primary gear. Some of the times I've had issues with KTMs is they have a very small fuel filter in here. To disconnect the fuel filter, just press this button here and this line will just pop right off. You'll get maybe 1 to 2 drops of gas come out, and that's it. And it'll basically seal itself off. What you want to do if you need to keep that open for extended time, they supply some little plugs to put in the gas line. If you don't have those handy, just throw a rubber glove over there or something like that. Just cover it up so you don't get anything in your gas line. But inside the bottom here is a little tiny filter. If you ever run these bikes out of gas, everything from the bottom of that tank sitting there is going to go straight to that tiny microscopic filter, and there's a very good chance it'll clog up and you'll notice some weird running conditions, or the bike might not even start. I've had it happen a few times. Pop that off, clean that little filter, or just change it. They're only like $1.50 a piece, good as new again. So like I said, it takes 2 minutes to do. Don't run these bikes out of gas. If you do, definitely swap that filter, at least clean it before you even bother starting it. Very common on all KTMs going back as far as I can remember. Sprocket bolts always come loose. I've got aftermarket wheels and sprockets on here, so I don't have that issue anymore, but the stock stuff, definitely an issue. Also, the spokes near the rim lock almost always come loose. Definitely keep an eye on those. I highly recommend this sprocket wrench from Warp 9. Just kind of curved and makes it easy. Those sprocket bolts can be really, really hard to get to, and this helps you get around those bolts. My favorite way to check spokes is just simply take a screwdriver or a wrench, give them all a tap, make sure they sound the same. If you have one that sounds really dull, you'll know. I like to, for servicing, if you need to remove the tank, again, just that one quick disconnect here to pull your gas tank off, and you'll find there's a little electrical connection on the other side. One bolt to take the seat off since 2018 and a half, 2019. 23 and up, it's up here. Previously, it was just back here. Just take off one bolt, seat pops off. And I would just leave these shrouds on. You don't even need to take them off. Just 4 8mm bolts up front for the radiator shrouds. Pull those apart and you can get your tank right off. Makes it really easy to access for valve checks, valve adjustments. This bolt down here is actually really cool, pretty unique to KTM. If you take off the cover on the timing side, you can put a wrench in there and adjust the crank. Once you get to top dead center, you can take this bolt out, take the washer off, put the bolt back in. It will lock the engine at top dead center. So when you go to adjust your valves, if you want to check your cam timing, basically just lock that in and you can open up your valve cover and check everything. And that's going to hold it in place for you. It won't let the engine turn at all. Remember to put that washer back in before you try to start the bike because it will be locked. Air filters on KTMs, super simple. New bikes, they're a little bit easier to pull off, but the other ones kind of work the same way. Open it up and just flip that, pull your filter right out. I like to throw a new filter on there every ride or two, depending on how dirty it is. All right, on the bottom of your throttle body, you're gonna find this little yellow, looks like a dial, little screw here. When you push that in, that's your cold start knob. Rarely will you need this. Use that for cold start only. That is not your idle adjustment. Your idle adjustment is a red knob up top. Pretty hard to see in this view, but it's on the top and it's red. If you do happen to use this to adjust your idle, you're gonna make the bike run really, really funny. It's gonna be hard to start. You're gonna have really weird low RPM response. You might even get a check engine light come on. So do not mess with this knob. Use it to push in and that's it. Cold start only. Now, if you did mess up and you did turn the screw by accident trying to set the idle, it's not that big of a deal. Turn it in all the way until it stops and back it out exactly 38 clicks. Then go set your idle from there with the red screw. I just want to show you a few key areas that like to rust on these bikes. So every time you wash it, let it dry and then hit all these spots with a little bit of WD-40. Top shock bolt here, the subframe bolts, all the brake mounting bolts, foot pegs, foot peg mounting bolts, all your linkage bolts, shock mounts, and on the old bikes, the shock adjusters themselves like to get corroded. I always hit those with some WD-40. Your rear axle bolts and chain adjusters, hit this with a little bit of WD-40. Your shifter mount, definitely front sprocket and sprocket bolt, of course your other peg. And I like to also hit the sprocket bolts, at least the outside, with some WD-40 too. They like to get a little bit of rust. Also, all of the little 8mm bolts under the fenders, those tend to, they've got like a zinc coating on them that wears off over time and you'll start to get a little rust there. So I like to basically spray everything with WD-40 after I do a wash. Everything up to the 23, 24 bikes, you can get away with just checking your chain with the usual 3 fingers. On the 23, 24 bikes, you need a little bit more chain slack. If you have the normal adjustment, it's going to be way tight halfway through the stroke. I actually pulled the shock off and tried pivoting the swing arm and it almost locks up under about 50, 60 millimeters of sag. That chain is super tight. So definitely look at the manual, set that to spec. I said, I had 3 fingers on top of this chain guide, measures exactly to spec for me. Everyone's fingers are different sizes, so obviously check and measure and find something for reference just to make that easy for you. These bikes do come with reversible bar mounts, so if you need the bars a little bit forward or a little bit back, you can just reverse that. If you need them way forward, you can actually run the enduro clamps on these. They actually have different mounts. The moto clamps are kind of set in the back position. They're not really centered like they used to be. Older bikes, 19 through 22, the bar position is going to be right in dead center of that clamp. The newer bikes are set a little bit further back. Well, that's it for this video. Next time, I'm going to show you guys how to do an oil change on these bikes in 5 minutes. If you found any of this information useful, please subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate it. And hope to see you guys back again soon. Take care.